My first slide was black because that was the one Murphy's Law glitch we got, so I didn't get my logo up there. But this is a talk about roller coasters, and they often say a startup is like a roller coaster, but what it's really like is like a lot of roller coasters at once. So you have your financing roller coaster, you have your hiring roller coaster, you have your product roller coaster. This roller coaster is about when you're just starting something new and you know there's a problem, but you don't know if there's a solution, and you kind of trick yourself into thinking you figured it out over and over again, but you actually haven't yet. So this started with a question, and the question I asked myself was there any way I could get my 5 and 8-year-old sons to be able to play VR stuff? Could I get them to play Job Simulator, Space Pirate Trainer, all these old games I liked when I got my Vive for the first time? And as I started thinking about it, I got a deeper question. The deeper question was, is there a way to get the headset out of the way? Is there a way to make it so that the headset wasn't a gate? Because we know that there are these problems that people encounter in various ways over the years with headsets. And so, trying to think about how I could get my kids to play VR, because I didn't want them to wear a headset, led me to think, well, maybe there's a way to get the headset out of the way for people that don't. And then the question was, well, what are the implications of that? And so really it kind of made me think maybe we've been living in the Matrix. Maybe this whole time our deep, deep assumption about reality is actually not true. What if it turns out that all of this work we've done for the last 10 years or more is actually predicated on this idea that headsets are necessary, but they actually are not, to use this amazing content we've made. And in fact, if that's true, if that wall gets broken down, you're looking at, give or take 20-to-1 ratio of just on the gaming side of people that are boxed out from using VR if they're in the category of people that don't want to wear a headset for whatever reason, or they can't wear a headset. Meanwhile, everybody's partying on the other side, but we're leaving all these people out. And so if you think about it, if that wall can get broken down, and you think about all the work we've done, all the titles that are on Steam and on the Quest, it would actually kind of be like they haven't launched yet. It'd be like these 6,000 games and titles basically are coming out for the first time when that wall comes down. So even though like right now there's a lot of kind of gray clouds from the recent news, this is actually a pretty amazing thing if it could be figured out, because it's actually launch day for a lot of the ecosystem if this ends up being a wall we can break down. And so I often think of something I remember John Carmack talking about when he was working on Gear VR, which he was very focused on getting the most value out of the device. He wanted to find use cases for the device that would benefit everybody. Photo watch or photo viewing, video watching, movie watching, all these like bread and butter use cases. He wanted to take all that work that they did to make that device ship and extract the most value out of it for the most people that he could. And so I kind of think about it like that, but on the software side, the content side. What if there's all this latent value in all of the work that we've done over the years, all this content, all these apps, all these games? What if this value is just sitting there and it just takes, digging it out and figuring out a way to get it out? And then suddenly all this value has been there this whole time. And so that brings me to the idea of the idea maze. So the idea maze is this concept from Balaji Srinivasan. And the way he talks about it is it's when a founder starts a company, they need to be able to navigate this maze in their heads of what are going to be all the places that they need to go on the business side, the product side, and think ahead of where the dead ends might be. And I usually use this analogy talking about actually manually going through the maze. If you can't front run it in your mind, you actually have to walk down it yourself to see where the dead ends are. And so this talk is about my winding path through the idea maze to try to solve this problem, to try to find a way to use VR content as is without wearing anything on your face. And so let's go to first principles, right? What is this software that we've developed? What does it really rely upon for it to work? Well, it requires a 6-DoF head pose that is updated every frame, 2 6-DoF controller poses typically, and then a certain set of button states. So it needs an axis stick state, trigger, grip state, and action buttons. So that's the contract. If you can find a way to get people to actually experience and have fun with this content, it just needs to be getting these inputs to deliver a frame and sound and the haptics, and then you've basically found some other way to use VR. And so I started developing this on Android. My thinking was that the Android ecosystem is where all the Quest content is being built. And so if I could find a solution here, it would basically unlock the Quest ecosystem for people to use it without wearing anything on their face. And so I forked the Monado OpenXR runtime, and then my first idea was kind of silly. I thought, well, maybe I can just get it running on a tablet And then you would use your thumbs, because I'm thinking of my kids. I wanted my kids to basically run around with stuff, and you could use your thumbs to drive the controls. Now that idea of using the tablet to basically look straight ahead in the game, so we can put this again. So basically, the trick here is that the camera is actually pointed straight ahead in the game, but you're looking down. So that was actually kind of helpful. And then it's using the inside-out tracking on the tablet to do the head pose. And so this didn't work, right? This was not even close to working, but it was the first kindle of an idea. And so the thing that it made me realize is that basically Apple and Google have kind of quietly shipped really, really good inside-out tracking on all of our phones and all of our tablets. And the technology they have in there now is quite incredible. And so, basically in this talk, I'm going to put a little light bulb in the corner of the screen when I've had these moments where I thought, oh my God, I have seen something and figured something out that very few people have even noticed. And these are the up parts of the roller coaster. These are when you think you've actually cracked some puzzle that nobody else has really figured out yet. And it almost never is the case. But I highlight them because it's part of the fun of telling the story. And so the first light bulb I had was basically realizing that the hardest part of a VR input system is the tracking. And lo and behold, we actually have in our pockets, all of us right now, a thing that we can pull out of our pockets and deliver a real-time track 6-dot pose. It's actually pretty good. So I was like, wow, that must be the answer. It must be that you use your phone as a VR controller. We all have phones in our pockets. That's the solution. And I also had this tablet prototype where I was doing AR core tracking. So now I had an answer for delivering your head pose. It was the tablet, and I had an answer for delivering a controller pose using your phone. And I was like, well, that's pretty close, but they're both tracking independently. They have independent tracking systems. So I was like, how do I synchronize the two of them? Well, I was like, okay, you can draw a fiducial tag on the phone, and the camera on the tablet can pick that fiducial tag up, and that can collapse the drift and align the coordinate systems. But if you hold a tablet like that, the fiducial tag actually is really hard for it to catch because it's often not the case that you're holding your phone over here and your tablet like this. And then one day I flipped the tablet over. And your tablet, basically your operating system is not happy when you do this usually, but if you flip your tablet over, you can get the camera lens on the other side if you're holding it in your left hand. And now the camera actually can catch what I was calling like the work area in front of you. And now all of a sudden I had a tablet and I had a phone and it was catching the Aruku tag, and I can show you basically, oh, and then sorry, I'll skip to the video first. So I have this this system where basically it's capturing the Aruku tag. And now you can see it's using the inside-out tracking for the phone, and it's aligning the coordinate systems, right? So it's basically able to play OpenXR content this way. I glossed past the third light bulb, which I'll talk about in a second, but you can see this kind of sort of works. But the third light bulb was the control scheme. So once I got the tracking working, I was kind of like, oh, well, I've just figured out the solution here. Obviously, this is a solution. And then I had to figure out the controls. And the controls were actually really tricky. The insight there was that when you're holding your phone at this angle, I tried a million different things. I tried your volume keys. I tried a bunch of different button schemes. The insight that I felt like I had was that your thumb, if you can calibrate the user interface so it understands your actual thumb length, then you can actually sweep your thumb like this and develop muscle memory. So you can actually control the phone using just this slight arc with your thumb. And so basically, you can see here I'm using this control scheme. And once you learn how to use it, you can actually hit these with pretty high accuracy when you're not looking at the phone. And you can switch hands, you can use the axis stick. So basically at the end of all of this, I had this thing, I had the controls, I could play stuff on it. And I was like, okay, that's the thing I brought to SVVR a few months ago. I was like, this is clearly the solution. I have figured out how to play VR with that headset. Okay, so I took that, I shipped it, I made this crazy video where I was using it. I actually was streaming Steam VR to the tablet. I did the green screen thing. I was basically proving out the control scheme in all these different games, I mean, it's ridiculous, really. And so I basically shipped this thing, and I got it out there, and I took it to a bunch of conferences. I showed it to people, and I was waiting for, the angels from the heavens to come down and tell me I had solved this problem, and nobody could use it at all, except me. And so basically, the result of this was that it was actually kind of funny because I could fool myself with this because I could give it to somebody, and they could draw their name in Tilt Brush. And I was like, oh my God, it's working. And then I'd be like, okay, now go pick up this block or whatever in this other demo, and they couldn't do it. And then they'd be trying to get the tracking, and it was just you got to get in front of users. And so I felt like I had shipped at the right time. I felt like I had shipped when I had a quantum of utility, as the program says, where I knew that this could play this content. And I did the whole Twitter video thing. I got enough traction with the interest in it that it was enough to get action leading to information. So basically, this was enough stuff going on where I did get a few people who saw it that got it. They knew what I was trying to do. They understood the pain point, and it was only because I did that that I was able to get to the next part. And so the next idea, based on talking to folks, was what if we take the tablet off of your hand, because that adds all this kind of awkwardness, and let's just show the VR content on the screen, okay? And we're going to use your phone. Everyone has a phone, so that's your VR controller. We'll figure out the controls. Maybe they're still too complicated, but we don't know yet because we're going to move it on the screen. But how do you control your head, right? Now this was always to me like a non-starter. Like you have this screen, but like you need to be able to look around. It's VR, right? So often people will be like, well, you use a webcam. So like your webcam can like get you this like dodging motion, but like if I want to like turn over here, well, I can't see the screen anymore. So it kind of just immediately doesn't make any sense if you think about it just for a little bit. So, basically I was kind of stuck on this. But then I realized there's actually a way to figure this out. And I had this playing a couple times, and if you tried my app over there, you got to try it. And it's kind of a subtle thing, but it actually really was the first light bulb that went on that I think has stayed on since I figured it out. And so the idea here is that what you want to be able to do is you have a user using their phone, in this case, as a controller, and you need a way that they can seamlessly control the camera and the controller in a way that feels good. And so your phone is a 6-DoF controller, so it can get you translation and rotation. And so the trick here is that the system basically can be in two states. First, what happens is you create a coordinate system where the user effectively tells you where their screen is, like that's the forward vector. And then you anchor the controller in screen space in a reasonable position where it would be if you were holding it in front of you. That defines a coordinate system so that now when you move the controller, it's moving relative to that anchor in 3D, but ultimately the anchor is based on that screen space position. And then you can switch between two different modes. You're either moving the controller and the camera is fixed, or you're moving the camera and the controller is fixed on the screen. And it's a subtle little trick, but basically if you do that, you get this really fluid interaction where you're using the 6-DoF on the phone to basically get both controller control and camera control seamlessly. Now, the other trick to this was figuring out how to actually engage that. So when you're using VR, you don't think about your camera control. You just turn your head, right? It's the most subconscious possible way to control a camera. And so the original way I implemented this was I was letting you use like your volume key, or I had a button on the screen, and it just felt like it was too much. Like it was too much cognitive load to actually kind of manage the state of the controls to decide when I'm moving my camera or not. Well, what actually worked was making it just putting your finger down. Just basically, if you put your finger down on the screen where the axis stick was actually incidentally, then I would engage the camera control. And if you lifted your finger off of that, then it would disengage the camera. And that actually finally felt right. That felt right in the sense that I didn't have to think about it. And so now I had this kind of hypothetical dream where I had my VR content on the display. I had VR, in this case, it was a phone on the controls, but basically this was now the idea. And so, oh wait, is that in the wrong spot? Yeah, so basically that was the idea, but the next question was, can I bring the real VR controllers in, right? Because people kept asking me, like, from the very beginning, like, why can't I use my VR controllers? Now, when I was doing the Android tablet version, that seemed like an obvious non-starter. Like, what's going to track them? How are they going to connect? And then when I got the display fixed, then I was like, okay, well, now I actually have a story for like how the controllers could be used in both hands. But then it was just a matter of being like, well, how do I track them? I can't connect them to the computer. And it took me way longer than it should have to just come up with a dumb, simple solution, which was like, well, let's just put the headset on a desk, turn it into a base station. It's the biggest kludge ever, but it actually works. So, that's the light bulb going on. And then the question was like, how do I actually get that to work? Because there's a couple problems. The first is that the headset has a proximity sensor, right? It'll just turn off if you just plug it in. And I wasn't going to tell people, go get a piece of duct tape to use my product. That's not electrical tape, right? And so that was one problem. How do you deal with the Guardian tracking? How do you get the controller up and running on there? How do you communicate with the headset? And so I basically sat and like had a nice long chat with GPT-5 Pro, and we brainstormed and came up with a kind of ridiculous Rube Goldberg device. And so the idea here is that what happens is you actually have to put your headset into developer mode, but like once it's in developer mode, you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can turn the proximity sensor off, you can turn the Guardian off. I hope to God that Meta doesn't stop me from being able to do that anytime soon. And then I can install an APK, and you can actually even communicate directly over ADB on a socket, so you can actually get really low latency communication there. And so here I am, basically playing for the first time a vanilla OpenXR build of a game called VXR Labs. It's actually a VR education app. And I'm using my Quest for the first time, 2 controllers, basically picking something up on a screen with my camera drag. And in fact, in this case, I'm using the capacitance touch on the Axis stick like I was using on the phone. But the great irony was like, I didn't actually figure that out using a VR controller. I figured it out on the phone. And then I was like, oh my God, the controllers actually also have a capacitance touch surface on the stick that basically no apps use at all for mechanics. And I can use that. So that's basically how I got to that solution. So let me see here. So then so as you're moving through these problems, right, you often don't see the squeaky wheel ahead of the current squeaky wheel. So as you can see, I moved through a bunch of different issues, and now I felt like I actually had a control scheme and a story for how I could play this stuff well on a fixed display, 2 6-stop controllers, the controllers you already know, so the learning curve for the phone thing just goes away. Camera control is working. So now the pain point left was content. And if you remember, I had basically built the Android version first because I thought, well, I can get people to give me their OpenXR builds and I can just run them. But in fact, not surprisingly in retrospect, it's really hard to get anybody that's building VR content to like go out and ask their development team to give you an APK just to try your crazy experiment before they even understand what you're doing, right? And so it was really hard for me to get content that I could use to experiment. I was streaming stuff on Steam VR to prove out the control scheme, but to actually get to the point where I could really play games with low latency and actually like start demoing it to people, I didn't have a way to get content. And so basically, I knew I was going to eventually come around to doing the PC version, but this was what really was finally the squeaky wheel that made me kind of do it. And so that went, and that went kind of viral, but this was me, after I finally got the PC version out, you could see all the, tons of work went into all this previous stuff. And in the end, in retrospect, right, I actually didn't really essentially need any of it. It didn't really actually go into the final thing that I felt really worked well, but I couldn't have actually navigated the idea maze. At least I couldn't have navigated it any other way. I did my best to try and move through it as quickly as I could, but all of that stuff basically ended up, I won't say I'm throwing it in the garbage, but it's definitely not the solution I wanted. And I'm sure there might be ways I use it, but that's kind of what I ended up doing. And so here I am using the final system. This is on my site right now. This is how you learn how to use the camera drag. You can see it's pretty seamless. I have it running over ADB over the cable. The latency is extremely low. And then this is the video that went pretty viral of me playing all these games. And it's always weird because you never know what's going to like catch on Twitter. And I just sat down, I just like played some of these games, just like threw this thing together, and I like shut it out, and then like next day it's like 3 or 4 million people saw this video. And I'm just like, I hope I didn't have anything weird on my desk, I'm like just like, okay, I guess like the whole world saw this thing. But this was actually really cool to be able to show the versatility of the input system and all of this. And so so I was wondering, I've been fooling myself, right, as you can tell, like up and down of the roller coaster. So how did I know this one was actually a real solution? And it was when I saw my 8-year-old kind of Saturday morning, I would come downstairs and he's playing Beat Saber on his little laptop. And like he set this whole thing up. Like I didn't do this. And I'm just like, dude, you're playing too much Beat Saber, man. You gotta stop, And so basically that was my first sign. And then we had their friends come over and then they were all playing like VR on the screen. I'm just like, okay, I think this actually works now. But this wasn't the end of the story. This is kind of like the iconic view of what I had in my mind at the time. But what if you could actually bring it into 3D, right? And that actually was something I always wondered about. And thanks to Nima, I actually was able to get connected with Leia, who does 3D display technology. And I got my hands on an Odyssey 3D, and I was so excited to get their SDK that in like a day, I integrated it. And then I played Beat Saber for the first time, and I just started laughing because I was like, okay, this was actually the last piece of the puzzle that I didn't know that I needed, but it actually was. And so I was able to take this to CES, actually. They were very graceful, and they offered me a chance to demo this in their suite at CES. And this is the official data that I collected about my user feedback. And so, as all of you probably know, working in VR for a very long time, when you get the holy shit, that means that you've actually now, you're on the right track. It doesn't mean you've figured it all out yet, But looking for that is kind of the gold standard KPI for going from 0 to 1. And I was very happy to see that. And I will say that I've done a lot of VR demos over the years, and being able to demo virtual reality content this way is kind of like getting a glass of water after you've been in the desert. Like, you can literally hold the controller for them while they're trying to figure it out. You can basically use your body language and their body language because they can see you. And you can actually navigate. Is it awkward for me to press this button for you right now? Or is it going to be creeping you out if I grab this from you? Just all these little things that you kind of like are used to tolerating doing VR demos go away. And they're also just like having a lot of fun. And you get to actually see their face having fun, which is also really, really awesome. So, so that was really fun. And so this is kind of the dream, right? Basically there's all these things I have in my head now, all these pictures I'm painting in my head. And I think that I can get there. These paintings still have the kludge, the VR headset on the desk, but the kludge is actually pretty good. But it's not the final solution, I don't think. But I think it can get me on base. And so basically, I want your help. And I think there's been a lot of gray clouds overhead, or whatever you want to call it. And I really do believe, though, that this is the beginning of a path that can actually break this industry and this ecosystem and our creative work free from this constraint. It doesn't mean that the headsets aren't amazing. I love it. But I do think that if we can kind of reset our assumptions, is it possible that this ecosystem has been built upon this assumption that's actually not true? And maybe it's only possible now. Maybe it really did need the 3D displays for this to work. But if you can actually deliver the experience and the fun and the productivity and just the utility of this that you see in like VR training and things like this, if you can get a lot of that value out of the software this way, that really will change everything. It will just, I don't even have to explain it. It's pretty self-evident that if there was another pillar to the stool here that basically got this content working for people without having to wear anything, I'm sure all of you can go back through your entire body of work and start thinking about, well, what would that actually mean? What if this actually is real and not just a gimmick or something? So yeah, I want your help. I want you to try it and give me your honest feedback. I've done like a dozen point releases since I launched. I've got Pico headsets working, so those are in there. And so and I also have external glasses support now, so you don't actually have to have a physical 3D monitor. You can also have a virtual 3D monitor, which is kind of cool. So yeah, I've just been exploring this space, and now that I have the controls working, I'm just kind of like a kid in a candy store, just like basically being like, that could work. Like, Nima gave me some awesome ideas. So yeah, I was really excited to be able to show this to you guys, and thank you. And it's always just great to be at SVVR and see everybody and share something cool. So thank you. Woo!